This is Nikki Grace, Director of OPGA, and I am here to announce that OPGA is going to be starting a So Everybody Can Move campaign in Iowa. And I am joined today by two very special people, Nicole Ver Kuilen and Sheryl Sachs, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Nicole, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, well, thanks, Nikki. Super excited that So Everybody Can Move is going to officially be coming to Iowa. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Ver Kuilen. I am the Director of Impact Campaigns for the Amputee Coalition and the campaign lead for So Everybody Can Move. I'm an individual living with limb loss. Happy Limb Loss and Limb Difference Awareness Month for April. For those of you who have been celebrating this month, love what you're wearing today, Nikki, the orange. I've got a little bit of orange myself, and really excited today to be sharing more about So Everybody Can Move.
Thank you, Nicole. Sheryl?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Sheryl Sachs. I'm a clinician based in the Maryland area and was the state lead for Maryland So Everybody Can Move initiative. We became the 6th state to pass legislation as part of this national initiative. I'm still working on expanding the Maryland legislation, but I'm also working with the national coalition, volunteering and providing support to other states that have introduced legislation. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you both for joining me. So I'm going to read the short mission statement on the front of the Empower Through Movement So Everybody Can Move booklet that is available on the website. It says, "We believe movement is medicine and physical activity is a right, not a privilege. But today, thousands of individuals living with limb loss and limb difference are unable to afford and access life-changing prosthetic and orthotic care that helps them be physically active due to inadequate insurance coverage." Nicole, I'm going to start with you. I know that you have a rich history and have done a lot in advocacy in the O&P space. Can you share a little bit about your history in advocacy and how you got to So Everybody Can Move?
Yeah, absolutely, Nikki. Well, my story really starts with my amputation and becoming a member of the limb loss community. I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma when I was 10 years old, and my parents and I had to make, the really difficult decision at that point to amputate my leg to save my life. But I think one of the biggest things that myself and my family were shocked to realize after my amputation was that only one prosthesis was provided by insurance. And I was told that, it wasn't waterproof and it wasn't meant for physical activity. And so, here we are having made this really difficult decision to give me the best quality of life and to continue living on, beating cancer, going through chemo, but then being left with this reality of not actually having access to the world. And, growing up in Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, being told that I couldn't go in the water with my leg was incredibly limiting as a child. It was one of my favorite things to do. And especially as a child who really self-identified as an athlete. I remember, doing the presidential fitness tests and always scoring, really highly on those and just being a really competitive kid. And so not having access to a prosthesis that would allow me to get back into those sports and just to play with my friends was incredibly limiting. And my family and I just kind of accepted that as a reality. We were saddled with thousands of dollars of medical debt, due to having gone through chemotherapy and cancer. And it really just wasn't something that we were able to take on at that point. And, we didn't really know much about what was out there in terms of access. But as I got older, I just tried to make do with the one prosthesis I had. And the result of that, I was constantly breaking my prosthetic foot, just even playing, just in gym class, doing the presidential fitness tests was breaking my foot, just trying to do those. And then even trying to play on sports teams growing up, again, was just constantly breaking my foot. And then over time, as I got older and I graduated from college, and even during college, I got into running as a form of kind of mental health and therapy and just a way to, meet other people and socialize. And that's when it really just started to catch up to my body. And I was basically running my pelvis out of alignment, training for my first half marathon. I was in physical therapy twice a week with just intense back pain. And finally, they told me, you need to stop running. This is causing damage, to your body. And I was 25 years old at the time. And I just couldn't believe that a medical professional was was telling me to stop doing something that was good for me, running and being physically fit and exercising, especially at a time when prosthetics were just all over and really rampant in the media. And I saw so many people who did have access to running blades and just really started to question the system of, why was it that I couldn't get access? And was working with my prosthetist at the time at the University of Michigan. She was doing everything in her power to try and help me find a solution. We went through 26 appointments over the course of the year, and I ended up with the exact same prosthesis that I'd had for the past 5 years. And that was just, at that point, I'd been an amputee for 16 years, and I was just incredibly fed up with the system. And so I decided to quit my job and recruit my mom and my partner and one of my best friends, just a really rough and tumble team, a really small group, and decided to do a 1,500-mile triathlon down the West Coast to raise awareness on this issue. We called it Forest Stump to bring some humor and, levity to the cause, and to really, say that the standard of care for amputees should be raised and that this should be medically necessary care for everyone. And it was at the end of that journey that I got noticed by a charity and was able to get access to my first ever running blade. So 16 years after my amputation, finally was able to go to my prosthetist and have us actually work in creating one. And, I was incredibly nervous. To put it on, I didn't know what it was going to feel like, but it really, once I was able to wear it for the first time, it finally felt like I had my leg back. And, that wasn't the goal of Forest Stump to get me a leg. It was really for us to change the system. And then having access to that really locked in my mind how amazing this access is to this care and that we needed to change things. And so that was back in 2017. And at that moment wanted to dedicate, my kind of life purpose to making sure that we could expand access to this care. And I've been working on this as a policy issue since then. Went to DC with the NAOP Brace Fellowship, which Nikki, both you and I were fellows of, to start working with Peter Thomas and George Brees and kind of starting to define this issue. And then eventually, being able to bring that as a policy proposal from NAOP to AOPA and getting other of the national partners on board, and then really kickstarting what was called at one point So Kids Can Move at AOPA. I was hired at AOPA, started So Kids Can Move there, which eventually very quickly became So Everybody Can Move as many of our states started pushing the age limits. And now So Everybody Can Move is held under the Amputee Coalition as the backbone organization. But all of these entities, including the Academy, are part of our steering committee and are dedicated to this movement. So that's, a little bit of background on kind of my personal journey and kind of history to this point in getting So Everybody Can Move off the ground.
Thank you for that, Nicole. And OPGA and VGM are certainly excited to be in collaboration with you and the Amputee Coalition and AOPA and NAAOP on this project. Sheryl, can you just share a little bit about what brought you to this campaign and the work that you've done on this campaign in recent months?
Absolutely. So my background and story is a little bit different than Nicole's. So I'm a clinician and I've been in clinical practice for over 13 years. So while I wasn't living the experiences that Nicole was sharing, I was seeing it with my patients each and every day. And knowing that as a clinician, I'm working with these individuals and I have the means and the technology to provide them with these medically necessary secondary orthoses and prostheses for physical activity, but inadequate insurance coverage is really limiting that from happening. And we have the one-off patient here or there who is fortunate enough to be able to pay out of pocket for these orthoses and prostheses. And just seeing the doors that it was able to open was really, really remarkable. I was kind of introduced to So Everybody Can Move as a volunteer with AOPA on their government relations committee. And the more I learned about this movement, the more I could really understand the importance of it. So I had a cold call with Nicole and two other individuals at AOPA and said, hey, I think policy is really important. I'm not totally sure what I'm doing, but I want to be involved. At that time, I had no idea that I was going to end up really leading the effort in Maryland. And I had a wonderful co-lead with a patient advocate, John Edward Heath. And we really kind of put together a group and a coalition that really had such a powerful impact in a really short period of time on the legislators. So we organized a group. We We're able to secure some wonderful bill sponsors. Our primary sponsor for our legislation in 2024 was Senator Pam Vital and Senator Sarah Elfreth, who's now Congresswoman Sarah Elfreth. And on the House side, our primary sponsor was Delegate Ashanti Martinez. And we had some amazing patient advocates who shared their stories in front of the legislature. And it was their stories that really helped to get the legislation off the ground. On the backside, I got to have all of those really fun conversations about the coding and the billing and really educating the legislators and the insurance lobbyists about what this legislation is, why it's important, and why it's really a win for everyone involved. So it was a huge learning process for myself. I am so honored to have been able to have played such a large role in the Maryland effort. And I am so thankful that I can continue to be involved to make sure that now that our law has gone into effect, that individuals are getting the coverage that's rightfully theirs, and then also working to expand Maryland's legislation as well as to support other states.
Thank you, Sheryl. As I said, I am really excited that we are pulling a team together here in Iowa, and I know that both of you have a lot to share, in the advice space about how to get those key team members so that you have collaborators and other people carrying the torch alongside you, and creating the timeline for, getting this into the next legislative session. I have spent quite a bit of time in your website and in your documents, and I want to say, Nicole, you and your team have done an amazing job at really putting this together in an easily digestible, almost spoon-fed, step-by-step kind of way. And I can see that these resources are going to help us a lot. Highlighted in these resources many, many times is the goal of achieving 28 by 28, having 28 states sign this legislation into action before the 2028 Paralympics in Los Angeles. Nicole, can you share a little bit about that goal and, how far we are from that goal and what the plan is to get us there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our 28 by 28 goal is all part of our long-term strategy with So Everybody Can Move. And, right now we are a state-based legislative movement working to pass our model legislation state by state, with the ultimate goal of then pursuing a federal strategy, right? And so that's where that 28 by 28 kind of rallying cry really comes into play. Of course, it sounds really great. It rolls off the tongue really well, so people remember it. But, what's really behind that is wanting to get 28 states to enact our So Everybody Can Move legislation by the 2028 Los Angeles Paralympics. Because once we're at 28, we're past 25 states that have enacted this. And once we have greater, more than 25 states, a majority of states that have enacted this legislation, it gives us a really strong foundational ground to go to, our federal members of Congress and say, hey, this is now the time for us to pursue a national bill and a federal bill. And that's, we're tackling various insurance plans throughout each of these through state-based legislation versus federal legislation. And that's something that we have to kind of educate the community on. The U.S. system of insurance is a very patchwork quilt system. A lot of people don't understand necessarily what is covered by state bills versus what is covered by our federal bills. And so at the state level, what we are able to change as a result of our So Everybody Can Move legislation is state regulated commercial plans, Medicaid, and state employee plans. And then at the federal level, what we can impact is those ERISA self-funded plans and then Medicare. So just to kind of lay that out for individuals. So in order to get to 28, our goal is to get these states enacted and then be able to pursue something federally. And why we're tying it to the Paralympics, I think for a lot of people, it's probably well understood. The Paralympics is an incredible platform and movement for the disability community. But what many people might not understand or know is that in other countries, when the Paralympics have come to their country and have hosted them on their own, turf, their own ground, and the fact that in 2028 it's going to be in LA here in the US, those other countries have actually made policy changes to require prosthetics for physical activity. So we are kind of taking a feather out of the cap of other countries of what they've already done, such as the UK and France, and saying let's do that here as well and kind of build this long-term goal of what we're working towards. So that's our 28 by 28 goal. And, the plans that are impacted at the state level, we want everyone covered as a result of this, but, policy change is incremental. And that's something that we've been wanting to make sure all of our state leads and advocates know, is that every win that we get state by state, no matter how much it covers, or maybe if they've had to make some concessions and, bring the bill down a bit, that's still okay. Like, we are making history with every single bill that we enact. And over time, that cumulative work that we're doing together as a community is what's going to have this huge impact.
Thank you, Nicole. Sheryl, do you have any insights, words of wisdom, or, secret decoder ring pieces that you can share with us about the process that you went through in Maine?
So I think one of the big lessons that we've learned is that every state and their legislative process is different. So what works well in one state may not necessarily work well in the other state. But we have certainly started to recognize some trends as we've been building up the coalition state by state. I think that the three big things that stand out to me are: one, building relationships; two, education, and three, using this effort as an ability to give patients a platform to share their stories. When I talk about building relationships, I think that has so many nuances to it, but one of the ways to build relationships is across the state for different O&P companies and for patients, and recognizing that this is not about us as clinicians. This is about the patients we serve. And the more that we can all come together and have a unified voice, the better it's going to be for our patients. It also includes building relationships with the legislators, whether it's reaching out to your own representatives or reaching out to legislators that sit on the committees where this legislation is going to be introduced and heard. And then three, building relationships with the payers, whether it's the insurance commissioner, whether it's the state Medicaid, depending on the legislation. Building those relationships and being able to have those conversations is really going to lead to the success of this effort, because at the end of the day, I think we all want the same thing, for the most part at least. And so having those conversations is going to help to ensure this legislation can pass. One of the ways to build those relationships is through education. What we found a lot of in Maryland, and that I see as a clinician having done this for a while, and that our patients see, is we're living this. But a lot of individuals don't know what a prosthesis is, don't know what an orthosis is, don't know the difference between the two, and don't understand what is currently covered. Maryland, for example, has insurance fairness, but not all states do. So we had a foundation when introducing our legislation. But being able to educate these individuals about what these devices are, why what we're requesting is medically necessary, is really important. And education can can include bringing samples to the legislators' offices, inviting those legislators, inviting those insurance companies and lobbyists and Medicaid individuals to the O&P offices so they can see individuals at work and really understand the field of O&P better than they already do. And then again, that last part is giving patients the platform for sharing their stories, sharing why this is so important to them. As I mentioned earlier, I am honored to be a part of this movement, but this isn't about me as a person or as a clinician. And someone may need an orthosis or a prosthesis from birth until for forever, essentially, or they may not know that they're going to eventually need them. But giving patients a voice is so powerful, and having a child or an adult talk about why their current prosthesis is not allowing them to live an active, healthy lifestyle. I don't think there's anything that's more powerful than that. So having the ability to introduce this legislation and have bill hearings to allow these patients to share their stories is so important. And in Maryland, a year later, we had legislators asking about the patients who advocated for this legislation. After hearing hundreds of bills, they left such a powerful impact in sharing their stories that these legislators are asking how they're doing a year later, asking if they were able to get the access that they voted for. And I really don't think there's anything that's more powerful than that.
Wow. Thank you, Sheryl. And I said Maine, I meant Maryland. It is evident your passion for what you're doing and the impact that it's having on the community, on your patients, and on you. This is really and I didn't share this at the beginning, but I myself also am an above knee amputee. I am also living in this community at multiple levels, and I see the struggle and I see the benefit, and I've spent years hearing the argument, well, if I needed a knee replacement, I would just get one so that I could run or climb or jump or do those things. And that's not true in the O&P space, which is why I'm excited to get this initiative going in Iowa. And I'm excited about forming the state coalition here in Iowa and getting people involved in building up that energy. It really feels like the state coalitions are strong in the states that have passed their legislation, and that those are deep wells of resources as well. I want to thank both of you for taking time out of your busy day to share more information about So Everybody Can Move. There will be contact information posted with this podcast, and additional information can be found at soeverybodycanmove.org. Thank you both.
Thanks, Nikki, for having us.
Thank you so much.